Reggie Littlejohn is the founder and president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, an international coalition that exposes and opposes forced abortion, gendercide, and sexual slavery in China. She also led the international effort to free blind activist Chen Wanchen, who was imprisoned for his work in exposing the forced abortion regime in China. An acclaimed international expert on China's one-child policy, Reggie has testified 8 times at the United States Congress, 3 times at the European Parliament, and she has presented at the British, Irish, and Canadian parliaments as well. Her first address at the European Parliament redefined the debate about China's one-child policy, revealing it to be systemic, state-sponsored violence against women. Reggie Littlejohn is one of the outstanding human rights defenders of our time. And I'm delighted to be joined, zooming over the internet with us in our studio here by Reggie Littlejohn. Reggie, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm honored to be here.
Well, before we talk a little bit about the work that you're currently doing, we might just take it back to all those years ago of your very first experience of the one-child policy in China.
Well, this was in the mid-90s. I'm an attorney, and in the mid-90s, I was practicing law in San Francisco, and I represented a Chinese refugee in her case for political asylum in the United States, and she had been forcibly sterilized. And what I mean by that is that she had been literally dragged out of her home, screaming and crying, held down to a table, sliced open, had her fallopian tubes tied, all of this without anesthesia. And then from that moment on, she had a massive infection. So she had chronic back pain, chronic abdominal pain, and chronic migraines for the rest of her life. And that was when I found out. I had known that China had a one-child policy, but I had never stopped to think about how it was enforced. And of course, the Chinese propaganda machine was saying, oh, this is all voluntary. Well, that's when I found out that it was enforced through forced abortion, forced sterilization, and even infanticide. So I eventually left the practice of law and founded Women's Rights Without Frontiers to expose this atrocity to the world.
It's so true that you should say that people might hear that kind of soundbite of the one-child policy, but not actually consider what that means in practical terms. What has the impact been, and what are the impacts you've seen, Reggie, in those years of the one-child policy, now the two-child policy, but what's it been like for women in China?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party years ago boasted that they had prevented 400 million lives through the one-child policy. Now that number 400 million is greater than the entire population of the United States and Canada combined. And that I think it's probably more like 500 million by now. It's a lot. And every one of those are babies that were most of them forcibly aborted. And I would say that those babies, of course, are victims, but I would say the mothers and even the fathers are victims. It just traumatizes the entire family. And what it has done long term is it has, because of son preference, it has led to gendercide, the sex-selective abortion of baby girls, which has led to a situation where there's 37 million more men living in China than women. And that has led in turn to sex trafficking. China is like one of the worst countries in the world for sex trafficking.
So basically women are smuggled into China in order to find wives for these men, because the population is so disproportionate.
Yes, that's part of it. That's probably that's a very important part of it. Women smuggled, or not even necessarily smuggled, but defrauded, so that they will go. For example, there was a story recently about a woman in Myanmar who was told that she was going to be getting a great job as a cook in China, and then when she got there, she found out that she was a forced bride. So, and so many women from even as far away as Africa are brought into China to be sex slaves. Women are trafficked from within China also, and also China is a major. They actually provide sex slaves to other countries. So you put it all together, and China is one of the worst countries in the world in terms of sex trafficking.
That's obviously one of the biggest parts of the work that you're doing, is trying to end this practice of sex-selective abortion. Tell us a little bit about that, Reggie.
So sex-selective abortion is, in my opinion, a form of forced abortion, but it's not forced by the government, it's forced by the family. Because of the coercive low birth limit, especially under the one-child policy, because of son preference, most families, really is usually the father and his parents, want that one child or one of the two children to be a boy. And so then they will pressure and pressure and pressure a woman to go in and get an ultrasound. And if she finds out that she's having a girl, they then will pressure her to abort that baby or abandon her. So either they say, give her up. Give her up can mean give her to a childless couple, but too often it means put her into leave her out in a field to die. And so we have something called a Save a Girl campaign, where we have saved hundreds of baby girls in China from either sex-selective abortion or abandonment. And there's many, many girls where the mother is being pressured to give up the girl, but because of the resources that we have given the mother, that she's able to keep her daughter. So this is something that gets me up in the morning. Is all those baby girls that are with their mothers, alive and happy and healthy because of our work in China.
And it's probably one of those issues in terms of sex-selective abortion that for too long people thought, this issue is confined to other countries that are far away, whether it's China or India, but it's happening in Europe as well.
Oh, and it's happening in America as well. And see, this is the thing, is that the so-called feminists will say, we should allow sex-selective abortion because people should be able to abort for any reason. And so then they tout it as some kind of a women's right or women's freedom. And what they are ignoring is that for every sex-selective abortion that is done by somebody who's freely choosing to abort a healthy baby because of its gender, there's probably 100 women who are being forced by their husbands, by their families to abort, and they don't want to abort those baby girls. And laws against sex-selective abortion protect those women and their right to give birth to their daughters.
One story that is particularly touching is that of Annie Zhang. Would you share that with us, Reggie?
Oh, well, Annie was almost a victim of forced abortion by the government. So she was born in 2003, and her father, Zhang, is a dissident. He was in China. We've been able to get him to the United States, but he was being heavily persecuted in China. And when they could not silence him by jailing him and torturing him, they actually went after his daughter, Annie. But when Annie's mother was pregnant with her, because Annie was his second child, they were coming in to try to forcibly abort her mother. And her mother, they threatened them, like, we're going to throw boiling water on you. We're going to, take a knife and stab you if you grab us and forcibly abort our baby. Because they fought back so hard, both physically and also Zhang Lin, of course, as the dissident, had an online following and sort of documenting what they were doing. And they let Annie be born. Okay, so she made it into this world. But then when Zhang Lin, when they couldn't shut up her father, the dissident, they went after her and detained her. Or actually what they did is they made it so that she could not go to school. They put her and her father in a house arrest. They escaped house arrest. And when they were caught, her father got word out to me saying, could you please help me get Annie, into the United States? She can't lead a normal life here. So I was able, with help, to get her here. And we are now raising her as our own daughter in our home. And we also were able to get her sister here. And eventually her father here. So the whole family is here now, living in the land of freedom instead of under totalitarian communism.
It's a world that for many is hard to imagine, Reggie. And just like the stories you've been sharing about the one-child policy, so many of these things are buried in the news media. We just don't hear about them. And I think many people listening and watching you today, they will have never heard of Uyghur and the re-education camps. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, people have been saying that since China went from a one-child policy to a two-child policy, that was announced as that China had ended coercive population control. And that is far from the case. And we can see it very clearly among the Uyghurs. So the Uyghurs live in the Xinjiang province of China, which is also known as East Turkestan. They're mostly Muslim. And the Chinese government has basically outlawed the nation, saying that they're all terrorists, and have put them into internment camps. They call them re-education camps, but what they're doing is they are basically committing cultural genocide. And in these camps, one of the primary reasons that people can come to one of these camps is having too many children, meaning 3 children instead of 2, even though it may have been legal for them to have 3 children at the time that they had the 3rd child. Now that there's a 2-child policy, people are getting thrown into these camps for having had a 3rd child. And in these camps, there's forced abortion. They have forced pregnancy tests. Women who are found to be pregnant are forcibly aborted. They're sterilizing people. They're torturing people. And this just shows that to this day, to this very minute, China is committing forced abortion and forced sterilizations and coercive population control.
What is the reason then, Reggie, do you think that governments like the United States, like the Irish government, who, on some issues will stand up to other countries? So, I mean, we do a huge amount of business with China, but governments aren't standing up and saying these types of policies are not right.
Well, you know what? I have to tell you, we are standing up to them on this issue. Okay. So first of all, President Trump has stood up to China on multiple issues like no one else ever has. And the United States government, which means it was the US Congress, the Senate, and President Trump signed into law on June 17th, 2020, the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act. And so what it does is it details all the atrocities against the Uyghurs, perpetrated by the Chinese government, and names officials who are responsible and holds them accountable for that in a variety of ways. So I'm actually proud of our government on that particular aspect.
And it's a shame then hearing that, and I think people will be very happy to hear that we, for example, that was not really reported here in the Irish media, that was an action that President Trump had taken, of course. And, rather than that being kind of a leadership, getting the ball rolling from other countries saying, okay, well, let us follow suit here. Sadly, other countries haven't got on board.
Well, okay, so this is something that your listeners can do. Maybe somebody in Ireland can, start a petition saying we need a Uyghurs Human Rights Policy Act and get the Irish government to take action as well.
Yeah, it's a good action piece that we can do today. Do you think that, what's been perpetrated against the Uyghur people meets the probably more understood definition of genocide?
I do. So the definition of genocide is the deliberate killing of an ethnic group, and that's sort of a boiled down. And so this is not like a quick dramatic genocide where they go in and just mow everybody down, but they are absolutely killing people, in Xinjiang, East Turkestan. And then what they're doing is also a cultural genocide. So these internment camps, these quote unquote re-education camps, what they're trying to do is they're trying to re-educate the Muslim people to become atheists, and become atheist communists. In other words, they're trying to educate them out of their culture. They're trying to educate them out of their faith. So, and then they're taking their children away and putting them in orphanages or in some other kind of schools where they are undergoing basically brainwashing, Chinese indoctrination to be more faithful to the Chinese government than they are to their own family.
Reggie, I think most people listening to you today will just be so inspired by your courage and your commitment to this cause that has just been unwavering. What is it that actually keeps you going?
Well, another thing that keeps me going is our helping the widows. So this is something that's really, really underreported. So we have a network inside of China for our Save a Girl campaign. And we have found families where the mother is being pressured to abort or abandon her baby girl. And we'll go to her door and say, you know, congratulations on your daughter. Girls are as good as boys, and we will give you $25 a month for a year to empower you to keep your daughter. And so that's how we've been saving these girls. We've had a huge success rate with this. But in that same area, we were discovering these abandoned widows who are also victims of the one-child policy. Because in rural China, where we are, they used to have large families which would support the elderly. And now the family structure has been decimated, so there's no one to support these elderly. And senior suicide has skyrocketed 500% over the last 20 years in connection with the one-child policy, with these seniors actually being sometimes pressured by their own families to kill themselves. And so because we have this network, we are able to actually go to these widows and say, you're a human being created by God in his image. You have dignity, and we're here to help you. And we give them $25 a month. And for some of those, that goes directly into being able to eat every day. For others, they use it to heat. We were in a cold area to heat their little room during the winter. But what it does is it conveys to them that someone somewhere, even on the other side of the world, even when their own children have abandoned them, someone somewhere cares about them and is willing to come to them every month and make sure that they have some improvement in their lives and in their dignity in their old age.
I think the dignity is the key word there, just about the respect for each and every human being, whatever age they are. And is that something that the pro-life movement needs to really focus on, that, you know, being pro-life is respecting life at all stages?
That's right. And with the rise of horrific euthanasia in our time, you know, including in Europe, I don't know if it's hit Ireland yet, but I do think that the pro-life movement needs to embrace the whole life of the person, from conception to natural death, and to oppose these horrible policies of euthanasia, where people can be. I read an article recently where one of the key reasons that people decide to euthanize themselves is that they don't want to be a burden on their family. That's very similar to China. In China, we have one woman who, when her husband was sick, their daughter-in-law came to them and basically was pressuring him to just kill himself. She said, she was telling the neighbors, you know, there's this other woman in the community, when she found out that she had breast cancer, she hung herself on the tree in the backyard to save her family the expense of her medical care. And that was held up as a positive example. She's told the couple, you know, we're going to be beggars if you don't, you know, basically just agree to just kill yourself. I mean, this is terrible. So the message we need to be giving to seniors and people who are sick is, Mom, Dad, I love you. I'm so grateful to you for all you've done for me all my life. You're not a burden to me. I am honored to be able to help you now when you need help, because without you, I wouldn't even be here. That's the message we should be conveying to seniors.
And the sad thing is, Reggie, I think when you're just mentioning some of those stories in China, people might, you know, be shocked by that. But the pressure that certainly we're seeing here in Ireland and throughout Europe, where the euthanasia debate is concerned, is the undercurrent, is this idea of the elderly, rather than being a gift to society, are a burden. And I think we need to fight really strongly against that narrative. One of the things I wanted to bring you back to is, you might remember the last time you were in Ireland, you joined a silent protest with some members of the pro-life campaign outside the Chinese embassy in Dublin, where you were looking for the release from house arrest of the amazing human rights campaigner Chen Guangchen. I think shortly after that, there was an interesting development.
Well, okay, so number one, I think I love the pro-life campaign for many reasons, but one of it is that your people really take action. I mean, it's like, let's go, let's protest after I told them about Chen Guangchen. Okay, so we were there protesting silently, holding pictures of Chen Guangchen. And I think that the Irish Dáil passed a resolution in his favor. All right. So then I went back to my hotel room, and I think it was that night or just a couple nights later, and I had been in communication with somebody inside of China who was helping him inside of China. And she told me that he had escaped house arrest, but was in hiding. And the police didn't know yet that he had escaped. Anyway, so while I was in Ireland, the police found out that he escaped. And she was very worried about being detained. And I was on Skype with her about half of the night, and then all of a sudden her Skype went dead, and I knew that she had been detained.
And what happened next then?
Well, I'll tell you, I flew to DC and, was advocating for her. She eventually got out and said that she had been treated well. I was very worried that she was being tortured. She wasn't, but it was a pretty severe warning. When they had her in a hotel room, they could have done anything that they wanted to her. They didn't. And I think that part of that was because of the international attention, right? This is something that people need to understand. People think that appeasing China and just kind of looking the other way when they do bad things is going to help our relationship with them. No, it does not. Okay. You turn the blind eye, you don't hold them accountable, and they'll just push further and push further and push further with worse abuse. And what dissidents say who've escaped, including Chen Guangchen, will tell you is that when the international eye is on their case, they are treated better in detention.
So then anyway, it's that's one of the probably the important messages, Reggie, today, just for people who are listening to you, and just sometimes you can feel powerless when you think of the power that the Chinese authorities have in these situations of forced sterilization and abortion. And it's the danger that we can fall into and say, well, what can I actually do about it?
Right. Well, I mean, one thing you can do is go on my website. So this is womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. That's womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. It's a long name for my website. But you can sign our petition against forced abortion. And we have collected over 40,000 signatures so far, and we want it to get up to 50,000, and then we will deliver it to the Chinese consulate or embassy in DC. And that will be publicized. And, this is a way of pressuring them. So actually, September 25th is going to be the 40th anniversary of the one-child policy. I would like to be able to deliver those signatures on that day. So if people could get on there and sign the petition against forced abortion, their voices will be heard.
What else would you say to people watching today, especially here in Ireland? We've had a difficult time with the abortion referendum passing, and it's easy for people to feel a little bit despondent. But you are a woman who's got such passion and drive. How can we get a bit of that in our lives?
And if people want to have a direct impact in China, if they want to feel that they are helping save a baby or save a widow, they can help. They can get more information on how they can help on my website. Again, it's womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. And on the homepage to the right, there's a button that says Save a Girl, and there's another button that says Save a Widow. They're big, they're red, they're on the right side of the homepage. Click on those and find out how you can help. And you can have a direct impact on the lives of people in China.
You mentioned earlier, I just finally wanted to ask you, when you were talking about the Uyghur people, the situation is, in terms of us contacting our politicians and being proactive politically, that's obviously something you've been really successful at doing, but people mightn't feel the confidence. Do we just need to be a bit kind of bulgy with our representatives on this issue, do you think?
Yeah, so it would take somebody like the Pro-Life Campaign, who already has an infrastructure, to send it out to maybe send this interview out and create a petition, and then people should sign it, and then have a media event where you present it, and have a press conference, and talk about what's happening to the Uyghur people. And yeah, you need to put pressure on them. You need to. I mean, this is the thing, okay? In the United States, the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act passed with almost unanimous consent. So the left and the right both agreed that this has to stop. So I think that it is an issue that people can feel empowered around, because I think that you'll be successful. I think that if you push, that you will be successful to get the Irish government to take a similar stand.
It's something
and maybe
that
that will inspire other people in Europe to do it as well.
as you say, something that we can come together on, whatever side of the fence that you sit on politically or on the pro-life issue. We can all come together on these policies. I know there's probably so many stories, Reggie, that you could recount that just show the barbarity of what's happening in China, but you might just share one or two stories with us that have had an impact on you over the years.
Well, one of my very favorite situations of rescuing girls happened a number of years ago, but there was a young woman. She was pregnant. Her mother-in-law, wanted a boy, so she started pressuring her to get an ultrasound. And this is very typical that these women, first of all, you can't even tell the fetus of the gender of a fetus until, I don't know, 6 months or something. So all of these sex selective abortions are by definition, they are late term. So anyway, she was dragging her feet, and I don't know how many months pregnant she was, 7 months, 8 months, very late in the pregnancy. She finally relented and went in for that ultrasound. And what she discovered is that not only was she carrying one, but she was carrying 2 baby girls. So that even under the 2-child policy, both of her slots would be used up by girls. So then the mother-in-law came in and was just hammering her to end that pregnancy altogether. And she didn't want to. So thank God our field worker found out about this and visited her and said, congratulations on your daughters. Girls are as good as boys. And we will give you not only one, but we will give you 2 monthly stipends for a year to empower you to keep your daughters. So those girls were born, and they are cute as pie. And they wouldn't even be alive if it weren't for our campaign. So just even that those 2 lives saved makes everything worth it.
It makes it all worthwhile. It's amazing, actually. It's just like, as we're chatting, that obviously one of the big issues in China in terms of sex selective abortion is pressure that women are put under by other people to have abortions. And of course, that's happening in Western countries, but in different ways. Pressure might be coming from an abusive partner or from another family member. So this abortion pressure is something that crosses seas and borders.
Well, that's right. I mean, there are forced abortions in the United States, no doubt in Ireland as well. So one case of a forced abortion would be, where the daughter of an upstanding couple gets pregnant and they don't want the shame on their family and they force their daughter to have an abortion. I mean, that's illegal. You can't force another person to have an abortion. So, and then as you said, there are boyfriends who just don't want their girlfriends to have a baby, and there are a lot of situations. Anytime a woman is pressured into having an abortion that she does not want to have, that's a forced abortion, and it's illegal under US law.
Reggie, it's been just absolutely wonderful to be able to chat to you today, and indeed about the fantastic work that Women's Rights Without Frontiers is doing. And we'll show the website again so people can check out the work that you do and support the work as well. And we're looking forward to chatting to you very shortly on our panel discussion. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.